welcome. You're tuned into an episode of Whistlekick Martial Arts Radio, and our guest today for episode 802, Senior Master Jeff Speakman. Yep, that Jeff Speakman. My name's Jeremy Lesniak. I'm your host for the show, founder of Whistlekick, where all we do is in support of traditional martial arts. If you are a traditional martial artist somewhere in the world and you train and you love training, I don't care what you train, where, when, why. I don't even care how. I care that you train. And if you are a martial artist, we make a lot of stuff. We do a lot of things in support of you and your training. And if you go to whistlekick.com, you can find all of them, from the events to the training programs, to the protective equipment, to apparel. There's lots of great stuff over there. Check it out. And if you use the code podcast15, it's going to save you 15% and lets us know that the show, leads back to selling some stuff, which business-wise is a good thing to know. This show gets its own website because there's a lot going on for the show by itself, whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. We've got 801 episodes beyond this one for you to check out. So if you're new to the show, plenty of time to fill your commute or cleaning the house or whatever you do when you're checking out this show. And I hope that you do, because it means a lot to us. Our mission to connect, educate, and entertain the traditional martial artists of the world. It really resonates for the team, for myself, and for many of you. And if that resonance makes you think, I'd love to keep these guys going, I'd love to support them, well, you can make a purchase, but you could also leave a review. And we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/whistlekick. Starts at only $2 a month. And we're going to throw great stuff your way. If you like the show, you will love the stuff we do in Patreon. It's just an extension. It's a little bit more raw, uncut. Sometimes I'm not even going to tell you. You got to go check it out. Patreon.com/whistlekick. And if you've been listening a while, watching a while, if you are part of our family, you should be checking out the family page. Whistlekick.com/family is a page we update every week with all the things you can do to help us. But it's also a place that we post some exclusive stuff you're not going to find anywhere else. Okay. So today's guest likely needs no introduction for you. So let me introduce a little bit from my vantage what's happening here. As you might imagine, when we started Martial Arts Radio, well, the we was just me. I did the booking, I did the editing, I did the posting, I did all of it. Every single thing that happened at Whistlekick for quite a while was just me. And there was a list. There was a list of people I wanted to have on the show. And they were big names. And we've had many of them. This is one that was on that list from day one. When you think about Jeff Speakman, you probably think about his movie debut, The Perfect Weapon. And you probably think about the way his fight scenes happened. The authenticity, the quality. In fact, The Perfect Weapon was the first martial arts film that I heard people talk about and point to the fight scenes and say, that was realistic. I liked the way that was done, as opposed to a lot of the stuff through the 80s where, it was slow, or it was, very bluntly choreographed. Not in this film. And I think it's that contrast that has made him such a celebrated figure in our world. And now, finally, thanks to Andrew's persistence, we have him on the show. Whenever I have conversations with celebrity martial artists, I hope that I rise to the occasion because of the way they're showing up. I value their time, but they generally give some great stuff. This is no exception. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode, and I'll talk to you some more on the other side in the outro. And I want to thank you for coming on. Appreciate your time. And I suspect most of the audience knows who you are, so we don't really need to do a big formal intro, but I'm going to ask you to start the way that I asked nearly everyone to start. We'll let that guide where we head next, and that's, what was your first experience with martial arts?
My own personal experience was back in, excuse me, I'll attempt to fix this. There we go. My own personal experiences when I began in 1978 studying Japanese Goju-Ryu from a black belt of Blue Angel back in the Midwest where I was attending the university there. And then after a year or so of that is when I transitioned over and started to study directly from Hanchi Angel in Joplin, Missouri. And then I went on. And as you can imagine, I'm frustrated because this is not doing what I wanted to do. But tell me what does.
Yeah, exactly.
In the world of today's technology, I'm just trying to get this organized with any kind of luck that'll work. So back to the point. So it was really my experience with Blue Angel and Japanese Goju-Ryu that was my beginning. But I sought out martial arts because in high school, I was a springboard diver in the summer and a gymnast in the winter. And so when I left Chicago to go to college, excuse me, I always wanted to do either professional dance or martial arts. And I had a roommate for like a year. And then a year later, I found out he's a black belt in Japanese Goju-Ryu. And I always thought, wow, that was incredible to be a friend of a guy. You live with him, you share a home, and you don't even know he has any idea about martial arts. And I admired that humility, I guess, and it made me very curious. So then he was the one that started teaching me, and then eventually got me together with Mr. Angel.
We can certainly, in hindsight, see parallels between dance and martial arts, but I wouldn't imagine that too many kids in their late teens are looking at those two things as pursuits that they might want to engage in, either or.
Right, as a parallel. Right.
It's not a connection I think I would expect many to draw. Obviously, martial arts is where you ended up. What was it about dance?
Well, as I was explaining, I was a springboard diver all my life and a gymnast all through high school and a gymnast all my life. So when I left that environment, I wanted to do something movement related, but I did not want to continue on with springboard diving or on with gymnastics because it's sort of like I've been there, done that. You know, what would be next? Okay. And so I'm interested in the movement and the athleticism, if you will, of those two things. And that was the related context that I saw those two things. And I agree that it isn't normal, but I have lived my entire life carrying the burden of not being normal. And oddly enough, it has made all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Now, was it choreography within gymnastics that really resonated for you? Because I could definitely see choreography into dance, and if you have some understanding of martial, okay.
I think it was more general than that, but I think you're quite correct. It, as I would describe it to you now, it would be a propensity for extreme right hemisphere behavior. So that a visual, analytical, spatial, movement related, tied to athleticism, not just walking your dog around the block, but competitive, high level athleticism. And I had a very difficult family life growing up. So I became very good friends with another family there, the Cashmore family, and this was in Chicago, or the suburb of Chicago. And maybe you know somebody like this, but this family has such a genetic propensity to be outstanding athletes in anything that they ever did. Any one of the kids, you name it, tennis, football, gymnastics, swimming, anything. They were just amazing. So I literally hung out with them every day. And we were very good friends, and we played ping pong every night in their basement. And so my point of telling you that story is that was my norm, to hang around unbelievably exceptional martial artists. Well, that was just like falling off a log, you know, where everybody would look at what they did and their jaw would hit the ground. Well, that was just what they did every day. So that became my norm, you know, that level of commitment, that idea of athleticism on that level. So in other words, I was heavily predisposed. That was essentially the only thing that brought me happiness in my life all through my adolescent years until at the age 17, I left to go to the university, then college, now university in Joplin, Missouri. And So because I was so incredibly steeped in such an extreme level of that, that was my norm. Not that I was anywhere near as good as they were, but I was just with them. And you know what, you want to get good at tennis, play with somebody that kicks your ass every day. Right. Learn from the best, play with the best. If you want to advance yourself intellectually, hang around smart people and have the courage to shut up and sit and listen and take in the brilliance of who and what they are, appreciate it, and then give yourself permission to be changed by that.
Well said. Because it seems like such a significant, I don't believe in coincidences, but occurrence, you're attending college where you did and ending up, as you said, living with whom you did. What was it that brought you to Joplin? I don't imagine there are a whole lot of guys graduating school in Chicago and saying, I gotta go down here.
Yeah, there would have to be a story to that, and there is, of course. My best friend at that time in high school, again back in the suburb of Chicago, his family bought a small ranch in a very small town 45 minutes south of the small city of Joplin, Missouri. So he was attending that college. I stayed in contact with him. I was at the end of graduating from high school and hated my life and hated being home, and I had to get out of there. I got to get out. And so he said, look, why don't you move down here? I have an extra bedroom in my house. You can live here. And if you use this as your residency and then get accepted at that college and just live here and figure it out from there. And I went, okay, sounds good. And I then sold my car to pay for the U-Haul, and I moved down there, and that's what took me. So for my first semester, I fed a couple of dozen head of cattle every single morning, 5:30 in the morning, rain or shine or snow. I was out there feeding cattle that paid for my room and board on their ranch.
Okay. And I've had the experience of teaching, just as I'm sure you have and many others, teaching folks who have a lot of time in with some kind of physical pursuit, diving, gymnastics. Sometimes those folks really take to martial arts training because they're willing, they can let go. Other times it's really difficult to get them to move their body in this new way because they're so comfortable moving in this other way. Which were you?
I was already moving that way. So when I fell in love with martial arts right away, and then had the opportunity to learn directly from and become a black belt under Lou Angel, I ate that with a spoon. I mean, I immediately felt like, well, here's the conclusion I drew at that time. I said, I'm going to do this all my life. Of course, I had no idea how or where I was going to wind up here. But right from the time I began, I was very, very committed to the martial arts. And I was just so incredibly fortunate to be in this really very small city in the middle of the Midwest. This was 1976, by the way. And to have found a guy like Lou Angel. What are the chances of that? And what else is interesting is he was retired from teaching. He was the night sergeant at a police department outside of Joplin, Missouri, which was well known for being an extremely rowdy, troublesome little community. And so he was the troubleshooter. When there was trouble, they sent Angel out to take care of it. So my first lessons with Lou Angel, this little township was called Webb City. So my first experiences with Lou Angel was down in the abandoned jail cell basement of the Webb City, Missouri Police Department, and abandoned for a long time. One light bulb hanging down from a string in the ceiling, cement walls, old iron doors we worked out in a cell. And he had a dummy in the corner and a couple of guys that were his black belts forever came and trained with him occasionally. And that's where he started teaching me. Then probably about a year after that, he got reinvigorated and went back and reopened his school called the Academy of Self-Defense.
Wow. That sounds like it's straight out of a movie.
It's nuts. Yeah, excuse me. if you put that in the movie, people are going to go, "Oh, brother, really?"
Yeah,
but
that
it
would
really
never
was
happen.
true. Yeah, exactly. But and let me follow that just a little bit further.
Yeah.
Just to give you an idea of how I was raised in the martial arts. When you're in a traditional martial art as opposed to a non-traditional, so I was in both. When I was in a traditional, Japanese Goju-Ryu was being done exactly the way it was done 400 plus years ago, and you wouldn't deviate from it. You're never welcome to like raise your hand and say, "Excuse me, what does that mean?" or "How would you do that here or there?" You would be, you drop and do 40 push-ups, and if you were in a tournament and you were doing a point tournament and you were sure you scored the point, the other guy got the point, if you even went like that, you were immediately kicked out, taken out. If you actually went a little bit further than that, you were thrown out of the association. The patch was ripped off your gi and you were out for the rest of your life. I actually failed twice going up the ranks, including my last one, which was for Nidan Ho, which is the second half of the second degree black belt. In the Japanese systems, you got first, second, and third degree. Actually, I have a first part of it and a second part of it. Mm-hmm. So the Shodan Ho and Shodan, Nidan Ho and Nidan, I don't know, only has fourth degree black belt. You go to one belt moving forward. But anyway, the reason I failed the second time was we have a kind of a tension breathing kata, where you come out like this and you exhale, and it's a very strong, slow motion body tension. It's called Sanchin, is the name of the kata. And then there's a bit of Sanchin kind of movement in the brown belt kata called Tensho. And so I did all that, and then I finished that kata, and Mr. Angel stood up and he said, "Okay, bow to me and go sit down." And that's the only way you knew how you failed. You want to know what you did wrong? You got to show up and come to class the next day, which of course I did. And the reason I failed is because in my exhale of that moment in Tensho, where you're doing a slow motion tension thing, my breathing was too loud. And so he failed me for that reason. Now, that's the norm that I grew up in. Yeah. Then I come to California to study Kenpo, and I'm immediately immersed in that world. I'm trying to scramble to learn what's this about. How do you guys do this and that? I get overwhelmed by, 40, 50 times the information necessary to go to black belt and Kenpo than in Goju-Ryu. I mean, the differences are indescribable, and they're very difficult because the stances are different. The thinking is different. You name it. It's different. So it was a monstrous challenge. And then I eventually became a student directly under Ed Parker. Now, I wound up going to Kenpo because Lou Angel knew Ed Parker from back in the day. Mm-hmm. And he wrote me a letter of introduction. So in '83, I moved to California once again, paid for my car, sold my car to pay for the U-Haul, lived with a friend there, and found Mr. Parker at the International Championship in Long Beach, which mm-hmm. was the granddaddy of all tournaments back in the day. Walked up to him, bowed, and handed him this letter. He opened the tournament home at the tournament. Yep. Wow. I walk in this tournament in the Long Beach arena, this gargantuan, thousands of people in a stadium seating with rings all over. You can imagine what that looked like to a guy that just came from Joplin, Missouri. Like, what is this? So I kept asking people, where is Ed Parker? Where could I find him? And so eventually I found him, bowed very deeply to show my respect, gave him the letter, and he read it and said, "Oh, you're from my old friend Lou Angel. Here's my home phone number. Call me in a couple of weeks when I'm done with all this and I'll get you set up." And that's how I started.
Mm. Being that I'm imagining you're coming from these disciplines that have a fair amount of rigidity and consistency, and you end up in
Extremely.
Goju, which anybody who's trained Goju knows that that's a good way of describing that. And you come into Kenpo at a time where I wasn't there then, but my understanding historically is that it was a time of rapid evolution for Kenpo. Was that difficult for you to step into when I would imagine, across a 6-month span, things are changing?
Yeah.
This isn't like this anymore. It's like this now?
Yeah, right. It was extremely challenging. Even if that continuing evolution and change that you are correctly referring to wasn't there.
Mm.
It would still be like sticking your finger in a light socket going, what the, it was so incredible. We would do, from the perspective I had at that time, we would do things, techniques, and they were so brutal and so what I would have then called overkill, I now call overskill. But it was just astonishing. You couldn't have things more in a bipolar kind of an atmosphere. And then about 85, 6 is when I was asked by Ed Parker to go to his house every week with 3 other people and become a private student, which I never thought that would ever happen. And I just happened to be in Texas when he was there, went to his seminar, of course, and that's when he told me to not go to the West LA school, which was managed by Larry Tatum at that time, anymore, start coming to his house. So it wasn't like come to my house and go there. Don't go there anymore, just come to my house, which was a bizarre thing. Of course, I didn't ask why, because you don't ask why.
Right. Do you know why now?
Oh, so I learned why shortly thereafter, and I know why now as well. But I did exactly what he said.
Of course.
But the point I think I want to make sure I make clear is when I first showed up in Kenpo, it was a version 1.0, where there were, and it was literally called that. So there were 32 techniques per belt, and it was an insane amount. It's still an insane amount of too, but it was even more insane then. And then when I went to Mr. Parker's house in 85 or 6, 85, I think, that all changed. And it shifted to version 2, which was 24 techniques. So it was spread out much longer. And so then I not only were the number of techniques not that you didn't change, they were just spread it out. It was the same techniques spread out. But I actually altered many of the techniques, changed a lot of the extensions, finished different forms. So this was version 2.0, which was the more updated version of Kenpo. And that is what I learned from him. So I saw and personally experienced Kenpo 1.0 and then Kenpo 2.0. So I could see that arc. And because I got to know him so well, I understood how he thought to create that evolution and that change. And then so now fast forward to today, actually back in 2005, that's how it was how I and all my group with me were able to take the Kenpo 2.0 and change it to 3.0, 4.0, and eventually 2005 came to this thing we do now called Kenpo 5.0, because I knew how he thought. I was in the presence of a brilliant man. I could see it from 1.5 miles away, and I just shut up, as I mentioned to you earlier, and I just tried to absorb this unbelievable amount of information coming from the mouth and the mind of a guy who I refer to as the Einstein of martial arts. He was so brilliant in what he did. And if I may, what I mean by that is when you read about Einstein or the other incredible brains of humanity, the one thing that you see that they all have in common is they're able to look at exactly the same situation, if you will, and see something completely different. Many other brilliant people are looking at the same thing and they don't get it. And some people can do that. And if you find somebody who's like that, you should pay attention. You should follow that person, because that's somebody with a big enough brain to be a leader that you want to emulate and follow that cognitive pathway. And in this case, also a physical pathway. So because I recognized that, I just absorbed every little bit that I could over those years, going to his house every week. And then I got the job. I was studying acting for 5 years. I got the job in The Perfect Weapon with Paramount, which I then brought him in with me, and we shared that experience together. Spent many, many hours talking about what he would like to see, because I had control of the fight scenes and I had final edit and sound check of the fight scenes. And as amazing as that is, throw this on top of it, that was my first movie.
Right.
Who's going to give a first-time guy that kind of authority and control? And that was actually given to me by Paramount after the movie was done, because they wanted to add some scenes. And they had a miserable experience with a guy that was the director and producer of that, Mark DeSalle, who produced Van Damme's first 3 movies, which is how he was able to take me and go into Paramount. And they didn't want to use him in that, so they came to me. And then when I was watching the edited scenes of the movie, I was saying, this is missing and this doesn't belong there. That should be here, there. And I'm saying that. And they go, okay, how about if you give it a shot? I've never set foot in an editing bay. And I said, great, I would love to. So I went in, did that, changed all the fight scenes, and sitting with very, very accomplished, intelligent people. And I would go, I know we have that on the other side, when they turn the cameras around and shoot from the B side. And that's what should go right there. And he went, oh, that's where that belongs. Because you got to admit, there's so much stuff going on in the middle of a Kenpo fight scene, certainly in the Perfect Weapon. It would be very easy for you to go, okay, I didn't know the technique was supposed to be that. Now I know. So I brought a lot of linear feet of the fight scene that were thrown in the trash can. I brought it back out and put it in, which expanded the fight scene. And those are the things that cost the most. So the more seconds you can get on camera on the final product of the fight scenes, the more money value you're getting. Because they just got thrown in the trash can, and now you're pulling them out of the trash can. And therefore, you're giving better bang for the buck, if you will, to the producers, and in this case, the studio.
And this explains why, for so many people, The Perfect Weapon was the first truly quality martial arts films in terms of the fight choreography and in terms of what we saw on screen. And obviously you cared about it because you invested that time. But I'm curious how much of that caring was you as a martial artist and how much was you as the star wanting to deliver a great result?
Well, it was first then and is now and will be as long as I'm on planet Earth, martial arts first. So I was a martial artist first, and then the movie star thing came and went. And maybe I'll go back one day again, maybe not, I don't know. But the through line since 1978, back when the Earth was cooling, is that I'm a martial artist first, second, and third. So, but your point is, yes, I also cared as the lead of the film, and I cared what it looked like, because the response, and this is really huge, imagine this on your shoulders, the responsibility of making sure that the fight scenes are accurate and done well and represent the art well. I mean, this is the first quote unquote Kenpo movie.
Right.
And now the responsibility on my shoulders of representing that correctly, and most importantly, the way Mr. Parker wanted it, was enormous. So I had to go in and prove that I could add value and therefore a better return on investment. If you let me do what I do, I'm going to get the best bang for the buck. And then that stayed through the rest of the 9 movies I started. And I always had contractually write the choreograph and have final edit and final sound check on all of the fight scenes. And if they didn't want to do that, I didn't do the movie. There was a time where Warner Brothers had me on a holding deal for a year to do a TV series. So we signed that deal. Everything was great. Now we start getting into the development of it. And when we approach the subject, it's okay, but I need to have control of the fight scenes, even though it's a weekly television show at that time. And they said, well, we don't give that authority to actors. This was Warner Brothers. And I said, okay, great. Here's a crazy idea. Give me another title. Don't pay me anymore. Just give me whatever title you need to give me to, so that I can have the approval. And remember, all I'm asking for is the ability to add value to the film, or in this case, the TV show. And in that equation was, and I can't interfere with the delivery schedule. So I said, okay, I can help train a guy or 2 guys or a team of people to edit the fight scenes correctly. And then you can have at it all you want, because they're still accurately representing what the art is. But they wouldn't even do that. So I said, well, okay, if you change your mind, call me. It really goes to corporate culture. So it's, when Warner Brothers came to me, they said, we don't do that. and I was not sarcastic, although I am in many things most of my life. I wasn't then. And I said, okay, great, I understand that. And what I'm trying to say is, but if we're going to work together, I got to have that. So you tell me what you need to be able to give me that, because it's not a negotiable point. And they were, who the heck are you? We're Warner Brothers. I said, okay, then you can keep it. Which, what actor given, right, would turn that down? But I never sold out. I never sold out. And even now in my association, and we're in 21 countries, we're the largest Kenpo organization international in history, I still won't give. You can talk to my student in Holland and Bolivia and Australia and New Zealand. They'll tell you, if you're going to walk this walk and you're going to wear this belt, you're going to earn it just like I did. So the good news is I've tested for all of my belts, including this 10th degree black belt I'm wearing. I never got a promotion. I got out with my students in line and tested. That's the good news. The bad news for them is now it's your turn. If I did it, you're going to do it. Now, that's going to attract a certain kind of person, and that's going to repel many other people. My point is, I don't care. You can stay or you can go. I'm not vying for students. I'm looking for a kind of person. It doesn't matter what language you speak, what color your skin, what religion you belong to, what your sexual preference is, or your sexual orientation. All those walls of illusion that everybody sets up and lives their entire life by, none of those exist in our association. The only judgment that exists is the content of your character. And I judge that by how you treat the other people in our organization and how you treat your students. I am much, much more impressed with that than I am with the physical stuff. Now, what's really, really unique and great about what we've accomplished in Kenpo 5.0 is we have both. We have amazing, wonderful human beings that want to make the world a better place, who happen to be first-rate martial artists, Kenpoists, and human beings at the same time. And I never thought, honestly, I never thought we would be as big as we are right now, because who would want to, that's a lot of work. Yeah. You would have to sacrifice a lot. And before I had all the videos and everything done, I still had people in Australia and Bolivia and all throughout Europe. I would see them once or twice a year. And they would still rise to the occasion and live by the standard. Now, of course, we have internet, and I put all of the system on the website. So we actually have an online university. So not only all the schools, but every single student around the world has access to the videos and the written version of not only the techniques, but the sets and the forms. So if you're sitting in Italy having lunch and you pull out your cell phone, you can see whatever it is you want to see 24/7.
It is, I don't think you can overstate the contributions that Ed Parker made to the world of martial arts.
No question.
And, you certainly have acknowledged his greatness, and even gone a bit further than I've heard others go in elevating him. And really what I'm finding interesting is you acknowledge and maybe even to a certain degree create these very big shoes that eventually you stepped into. And right. I'm wondering if that came with any sort of apprehension.
I'm not sure I would associate apprehension. I would certainly associate the word responsibility and overwhelming responsibility.
Sure.
And then the bombastic audacity to actually change the art, to take it from 4.0 to 5.0, which
you said something there that I was not able to say. So yes, thank you for going there, because that's a fairly bold thing to do, to say how brilliant this man is. Let me change some of the stuff he did.
Well, yes, except that was not only who he was and was always like that, because that's how we got from Kenpo 1.0 to 2.0 to 3.0 to 4.0, was him changing and evolving the art. But if you read anywhere of any of his works, let me give you a quote, which is one of the quotes we lean on to justify what we've done, which is, again, this is Ned Parker quote: "The ignorant refuse to study and the intelligent never stop. A real martial artist pursues change. He doesn't fear it." So it was his mandate that his black belts continued to change and evolve the art to keep it relative. Even another quote from his was, "When I'm gone, I hope no one traditionalizes my art." And much to my staggering surprise and disappointment, virtually everybody did exactly what he asked you not to do. And no one evolved it. No one changed it. If you had 100 Ed Parker black belts in the room, say, okay, everybody raise their hand to evolve the art, probably 5 hands would go up and mine would be one. Mm-hmm. And then you're, okay, of you 5 guys, who advanced the art to try to include ground fighting? 4 hands drop and mine stays up. Because my read of where we were to keep Kenpo relevant so it doesn't become obsolete is to approach the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which the Gracie brothers, and very grateful to them, and eventually the Machado family, brought to this country that version of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which morphed into this acronym we have now called MMA. So imagine all through the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s, Kenpo was clearly recognized as the street martial art until the Gracie showed up. Mm-hmm. And then we got it shoved down our throat like everybody else. And so you would be very hard pressed to find somebody more grateful to them and the Machado family than I am, because they enlightened us the hard way, but they enlightened us on what we didn't know. And that was then the wake-up call was, okay, guys, Mr. Parker's gone, but if you want to do something about Kenpo maintaining its position as the street fighting martial art, we better, because if we don't approach this, we're going to get creamed. And we got creamed. And so then I said, okay, you're not going to do it, so I'm going to do it. Well, when I did it, then I received a huge amount of pushback from not only much of the Kenpo community, but from many of the seniors who I knew. So now, fast forward to these more current days, let's say last 10 years, my position with those same people are, what are you doing? You have looked at 18 years of what I've done and the success created, and it's a solution for, whatever it is you want to see, we've done it. And yet you do nothing, including then that means in participating in doing exactly what Ed Parker asked you not to do.
Right. Well, why do you think that is?
Big question with different answers that almost compete with one another. One of them, which is actually in defense of those people who refuse to change, and that is that you just have to remember in the 70s and the 80s and even going into the 90s, communication was absolutely nothing like what it is, not just today, but in the last 10 years. Yeah. So the dissemination of the material and the information was 1/20th of what it is today or less, just because the communication standard wasn't there. Back then the web wasn't built. Nobody who had a PC, there were no cell phones, and now we have mini computers that are cell phones. So the rate of change through that technology has been greater in the last 5 years than the last 50, and greater in the last 10 than the last 100. So in a way to defend what I now call apathy is that it just wasn't there. Those standards, that information, that communication, it wasn't available to you, even if you wanted, even if you sought out. If you wanted to do it, you had to get on a plane and go to California. And many people did do that, much to all of their credit. But now when you move forward into today's world, where we can communicate on that level, we can learn, we can evolve, and they choose not to, in my opinion, is doing a tremendous disservice to Ed Parker, to the art of Kenpo, and to the potential of who we could be as an organized group.
Okay. Of those, you gave the metaphor, 100 people in a room, 5 of them are trying to move Kenpo forward the other 95, or, not raising their hand. Over the course of the work that you've been doing, how many of those 95 have, kind of taken it as a kick in the butt and started doing anything? Has it inspired anybody? Really?
None that I'm aware of. That came from the generation I came from. There's that language out there, first generation Parker, which of course there were lists and lists of long people who were black belts from Ed Parker long before I ever walked in the door. But the nomenclature definition of that category is, if you're a personal black belt under Ed Parker from whatever year, you're a first generation Parker black belt. Okay, that would fit me. But I don't want that. I want to be known as the last generation, not the first generation, which would be important only in Kenpo. If it was Goju-Ryu, it would be the opposite. It would be a negative. But in an art that's evolving, changing, growing, and the mandate and the edict is advance and change and grow even after I'm gone, guys, then the idea that you're changing and growing is the point. So on one hand, it's easy to understand how the older guys don't. On the other hand, it's very difficult for me to comprehend why they don't, because you knew Ed Parker, in some cases 20 years longer than I did. And you say openly that you were his student and you were close to him and this is how we all wanted it done, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. But then why haven't you changed? Why haven't you adapted the solution base of how to do your Kenpo on your back, which is what Kenpo 5.0 is? And there could have been many. And there are other people who are doing that, but they're just not first generation Parker. So the question begs, why not? What is it that you missed? Or I could phrase it in the way that I phrase it, which is, how could you be around a great man like that, which I refer to as the Einstein of martial arts, and not get who he was? And they go, what do you mean? Well, because if you got who he was, you would have changed and evolved the art. So you're showing me by your apathy that you're not interested in evolving and changing the art. You just want to keep it going. And once again, in an attempt to try to defend them, I would say, I get it, I understand it, because since you haven't evolved and changed and addressed grappling and how to figure out how to do it in Kenpo and meld those two worlds together, your population is declining rapidly. Because pick the 17-year-old kid who walks in and sees a Kenpo school and go, wow, that's really amazing. Well, what about on the ground? How do you get out of this or that or that? And they go, oh, well, we don't do ground fighting. Great, thank you, goodbye. So unless you address that situation in a very meaningful way, you're going to do this, and we are doing that. So once again, I can kind of understand why you don't like me. And to be honest with you, if I wasn't me, I probably wouldn't like me either. But that's not the case. Right. And because I went through my stage 4 cancer in 2013, it took 2 years for me to get my mojo back, which is a flip a coin if you're going to live or not. But one of the things that happened when I came out is I said, okay, I'm not drinking the Kool-Aid anymore. We're not doing this. I am no longer going to step back and go, well, maybe they won't like it if I went, okay, like it or love it or hate it, either way, I'm going ahead. And that is when we really took off on a worldwide. And what was kind of surprising to me was I thought maybe I would lose 10, 15, 20% of my student base. Well, the opposite happened. It was sort of like they were like, it's about time. We've been waiting for you to get over yourself so we can move on. And once that happened, the illumination of the way forward was very clear to me. And so I moved forward with that because, I came out of really close to being dead. And you look at it and you go, okay, what am I going to do with whatever heartbeats are left? I'm 65 now. It's been 10 years since my cancer. And if everything remains really good, I'm going to be dead in somewhere between 20 and 30 years. So let's work from that paradigm back and go, okay, I got 20 to 30 years of being alive, maybe 20 years of being physically active, maybe 10, I don't know. And so What am I going to do? What are you going to do? How are we going to help move things forward? So my message to the rest of the Kenpo community world is give yourself permission to step out and to be great and to be a part of something great. Maybe you like what we do, maybe you don't. Either way, I'm good with that. But if you want to operate on the very, very high level, do the entire art, once again, in an attempt to show my ignorance, I went for 39 years after the death of Ed Parker, assuming, of course, really because of where I came from, which I've explained to you with Blue Angel, that every single person who was a 4th degree black belt or higher would know our Form 7, the stick form, or 5th degree black belt and higher would know the Form 8, which is the knife form. And so for 39 years, I just assumed you and everybody else did. And I start looking around going, why is it for the last 25 years, no one asks me to come and sit on their testing board or to give seminars at their school or whatever? And I always thought it's because they didn't like what I did by evolving the art and the arrogance of it all and blah, blah, blah. And that may very well be true. But I now, 39 years later, I am highly suspect. That's because they don't do the basic minimum requirements for 4th and 5th and higher degree black belt. And if I'm sitting on your testing board and you're going for 5th, I'm going to raise my hand and say, excuse me, could I see Form 8? And then there's going to be some kind of answer like, well, we don't do Form 8. And then I'm going to go like this and look down over at their instructor and go, why don't you do Form 8? And the answer to that question is, well, we don't like it because there's a problem with this and that and that and that. And I would agree. We actually created a new Form 8. But then the next question, which is why I'm really become the Kenpo heretic, is because I turn and I say, well, what have you done to fix it? Yeah. And no one answers that question. And then sometimes they go to, well, the guy who or girl who taught me, our associate, we just don't do it. Okay. What have the people who are the heads of your organizations done to fix that problem and evolve Kenpo? Nothing. Well, where's the leadership in that? Based only on the edict that was sent forth from Ed Parker to evolve and change the art so it doesn't become obsolete. And so there is no pretty answer to that. So instead of inviting an ugly discussion, you just marginalize me and just keep me from interacting with your students. So doing shows like this changes that dynamic greatly, because there's only so much in today's world with the technology we are experiencing right at this moment that you can marginalize somebody. If the logic and the ownership and the understanding of who Ed Parker was and the evolution we have done, if you see that as what Kenpo really truly is, then the argument that we can have is, I just don't like what you did, or I don't like how you lead, or I don't like how you think. Okay, that I'm great. Tell me, because you'll help me be a better instructor, a better teacher, a better person. Give it to me. Lead me.
It's far
I'm
more
looking
productive.
for leadership all the time, and I don't see it.
Given that you've spent so much time thinking about this and immersed in this kind of root problem of the vast minority of Ed Parker students not taking his edict and moving it forward, not evolving and changing the art, I can only imagine that you've put some time into thinking, how do you make sure that your students do continue to change and evolve the art? You brought up your timeline. So I'm going to guess that a simple edict is not strong enough, and you've probably built something stronger into what you're doing. And I'm curious what that is.
Very, very much so. And thank you for asking that, because that's a super important, inculcated throughout our entire system thinking application, is the contributions that I demand from my students back to the system. You can go to any one of my schools, any one of my black belts, anywhere in the world, and visit with them like we're visiting now, and they will all, within reason, tell you that they feel a part of the association, of the energy that we've created, of the lifestyle and this, for lack of a better expression, this utopian society that we live in called the 5-0 family. They are co-contributors to that on a very, very big scale. And here's the deal. They know that. They feel that internally. And that is how I built this international association through the principles of behavioral management, which was my undergraduate degree way back. But I'm now currently attending Purdue University Graduate School for the Behavioral Sciences. So I'm moving forward with my education so that it would help me move forward with my next career move, which is motivational speaking on this topic, on this subject, for big international companies who want to increase the productivity of their employees, the problem solving of how to create a positive feedback loop in your environment, which also helps the retention of your employee base, which is also a cost saving thing because fewer people leave your organization, because when they do, then you have to train somebody, and that's a very costly thing. So if we can create an environment based on positive reinforcement that makes you want to stay, it's better for your corporation. That's where I'm moving now. So I sat down to write a book called Leadership in the Martial Arts, a Scientific Behavioral Approach. Then I stopped and I thought, you know what, I should go back to school and advance my education and bring it up and give me greater credulity to move forward in my new chosen field. And I've already had one experience last October of 2022 for the Emerson Electric Company, which is a Fortune 200 company, and spoke in this way and used the video, which I've sent on to you for my opening. And they really loved it. It was huge. And then I've now been approved as a motivational speaker for the Morgan Stanley Investment Corp. And I'm just waiting for my first date. I live in Las Vegas, which is where I am now. And they said it'll probably be LA, but if this works, then we're on internationally. And that's what I want. I spend every November in Europe because we have our 5-0 fighter competition. So we have our own system of fighting. So we have a European and Australasia for Australia, New Zealand, South America, and Bolivia, and then the World Championship every July here in Las Vegas, along with 3 regional tournaments in the US. So when we have that, I go to Europe for a month. And so while I'm there, I could be teaching seminars and giving motivational speaking to different international corporations. And that is my goal and my dream and my desire. And I'm taking action to move forward in that direction.
Wow. Whenever I talk to a guest who has taken their martial arts out into some other avenue of the world, inevitably, if we dig enough, we find that there are things through their non-martial pursuits that come back in to their martial arts. So I would imagine that through your education, through this speaking gig, the future speaking gigs, there are things that you're already identifying that you're going to pull back in, whether it's to curriculum or to the way you teach or to your organization. I'm wondering if you might speak on those.
Yes. At the risk of being redundant, the organization was really built on the logical, daily, practical application of basic behavioral management modification that I'm very familiar with. And because of the success rate I had in understanding those principles and putting them into action, that's what has coalesced our group. And then that's the message I can take out and help other companies build the similar kind of thing. So there's the bridge, back from education over to martial arts, back from martial arts, back over to education, and crossing back and forth. So we have all the time in my association, different meetings, Zoom classes when they come in to Las Vegas every year in July for our big event. We have a school owners meeting after. So I'm always teaching, not only about the logic and the science and the physics and the application of Kenpo, but the logic and the science and the physics and the application of the behavioral sciences, which helps you run your school. So all of our schools are very successful. We have many schools with over 200 students in them now, all around the world. The 2 biggest schools in all of Bolivia belong to us. So it's helping those students to understand how to employ the basic principles and physics of behavioral management. In turn, has made their businesses more successful, created a positive environment in their business, and generated back to the people they interact with. So we all equally understand that our interplane interaction in this 5-0 family is actually creating literally a utopian society that we can believe in, that we can live in and work in and finish out our lives in a world we created. We co-created this world. It isn't me at the top of the mountain forcing everybody to bow to my feet when I walk in. I'm just not that kind of person. I actually despise that kind of mentality. But on the other hand, we have to have structure and discipline and standards, and those are crystal clear, absolutely clear. And now we put them all on video and send them around the world. So it's full transparency. It's a complete evolution, tackling the 800-pound gorilla in the room, which is how to do your Kenpo on your back, and adapting and changing the system to bring that reality in. So if you were to stop into one of our school, mine, for example, in Las Vegas, and you would sit and watch a class while we're doing our ground stuff, it would look just like an MMA class, passing the guard and escaping from a rear naked choke and all the things that are associated with it. But it really isn't, MMA Monday, Tuesday, and Kenpo Wednesday, Thursday. It isn't that. It's an integration of the kind of ground fighting that we would do in Kenpo that's different than what Jiu-Jitsu or MMA does, for one simple reason. Those things are a sport. We are not. So I learned what your rules were, and then we created techniques that violate your rules. So that at the end of it all, if there was a happy outcome for the Kenpo 5.0 student against an MMA guy in the street, and that guy came back a week or 2 weeks later and said, "What the heck was that? You kicked me in the groin and you poked me in the trachea, and that's the only reason I lost the fight." And you would say, actually, that is the reason you lost the fight, because that's what we do, because we're a martial art. You don't do it because you're a martial sport. I'm not telling you one's any better than the other. If one of us stepped in the fighting sport arena, me, for example, I would get killed. If I stepped into a jiu-jitsu tournament, I would get wiped out. If I went into a boxing ring with a boxer, I would, get creamed in no time. I don't want to live in your world. I've created a world I want to live in, and that world is based on how to fight people like you outside of your world. Now, many of my students do participate in MMA and jiu-jitsu tournaments, and they step out of the Kenpo 5.0 into that world, and then they step back out of that into our world. The only thing I say is I don't want you to become that world, because in that world, you must cause a person to fall for you to gain. That's competition. That's in every competition, including ours, 5.0 fighter. But that's not what this is about. A martial fighter lives like that. A martial artist would actually sacrifice something of himself to help someone else advance. You see, that's completely antithetical. So what I say is, we live in that world, but we might have to go into that world. I don't want to fight, but I might have to. And if I do, I'm going to bring everything I got, because as Mr. Parker said in the street, it doesn't matter who's right, but who's left. Whoever's standing. And so if you train like that, and I can read the signals of some guy that maybe he's a jiu-jitsu MMA fighter, first thing in my mind is he doesn't check or protect his groin. And in Kenpo, from day one, your first technique you learn is how to kick somebody in the groin. And then the news gets worse after that. So we do have a window of opportunity where it could be highly effective. But in addition to that, I needed to bring the skill set of, oh, and by the way, if that doesn't work, then what the heck do I do? Well, I'm pulled into somebody else's guard. And so we needed to answer that, which meant we had to change the art.
Where else have you pulled material from? I would imagine it's from other martial arts as well. I imagine that, maybe not your Goju experience, but that there are elements from other traditional arts that you've looked at and said, I want to pull this, I want to pull this.
Most, and you're quite correct, but probably none of them came from traditional martial arts.
Okay.
We have borrowed heavily from jiu-jitsu, from MMA, from all that world. I even was a jiu-jitsu student for 4 years in LA under a gentleman by the name of Todd Nathanson. And I was so very, very fortunate to find him, because he's amazing at what he does, but more importantly, he's a good person, a really good person. And all he wants to do is help people. So when I walked in, as I'm sure you've heard many stories about people who start jiu-jitsu, they all get hurt, they get their wrist broken, they get their knee jacked up, whatever. There was none of that mentality in his school. They didn't have to. They were so talented, they didn't have to shove it down your throat. Right. Now, I did get hurt, of course, but a little bit. No one tried to hurt me, but I learned by, I wore a white gi and a white belt, and I was the other white meat. I just went in there and threw it down, and was just so fortunate that I found this particular man and his dojo in LA. Now, there were also many of my other students who all their life were wrestlers, got into jiu-jitsu and into MMA. And then there were several really good Kenpo guys in years past who left Kenpo because of this void, this vulnerability of being taken to the ground and not knowing what to do. So they left and they went into jiu-jitsu and MMA. When they found out what we were doing, they looked at it and then they came back. And this is all over the world. Now, when they came back, they brought their skill level and knowledge of how to fight on the ground and et cetera, et cetera. So we were all able to bring all of that information. And then we evolved Kenpo 5.0 again. So 2005 is when we started 5.0. About 2014 is when we began the process of evolving 5.0 again. So technically, we actually teach 5.0.2. So it means maybe there could be a 5.0.3. I don't know. As things evolve and change, we will match that.
I come from a world of technology, computer science, programming. And so these version numbers, I had wondered until you made that comment just now, how much you thought about them and to folks in the audience who may not know, the closer to the dot, the more significant the evolution. So, a 5 to a 6 is a big deal. A 5.0 to a 5.1 is less significant. 5.0 to 5.01 is even less significant. Right. Do you think there will be a 6?
There won't be in my lifetime under my tutelage.
Okay.
But I'm encouraging my students. I encourage everybody. If you want to take it to 5.0, 0.3, 0.4, you want to take it to 6.0 or 8.0, go for it. If other people look at what I've done, they go, I can do better than that. Show me. Go do it. Where are you? What have you been doing for the last 10 years, 20 years? What contributions have you made to the evolution of an art whose mandate is to evolve and change over time? Now, I totally and completely respect people who don't want to change. I came from a traditional art, so I know that mentality very well. But as time goes on and you refuse to change and try to find a way to make your Kenpo work against people who are well-trained, even moderately trained on the ground, if you don't, and you or one of your students are taken to the ground in a street fight by one of those guys, it will be a humiliating experience. Because the first thing I learned about jiu-jitsu is take the very best Kenpo guy you can think of with the veracity and the violence to do our striking art of Kenpo standing up as good as anybody or better. Take that level and throw it on the ground. And that's what jiu-jitsu is. So you think because somebody goes to take you down, you're going to just poke him in the eye or bite him or I won't let him take me down. That's a laughable position. And more importantly, it's dangerous. Because if you take that and pass that mentality onto your students and they have a false sense of security and they're taken down and they are trashed, then they're going to come back to you and go, okay, why didn't we do this? You will find out the hard way what jiu-jitsu and MMA can do. And even under the best of circumstances, which we feel we are, you might have a 50-50 chance of being able to survive that under the best of circumstances. So don't kid yourself. You keep doing your Kenpo, picking low-hanging fruit, and you run into the wrong guy, and it's not going to be pretty. And what I'm telling you is, first, I'm 65 years old and I'm past cancer, so I don't have much gas in the tank anyhow. But even though if I'm taken down by somebody and I pull every trick in the bag that I know of the 5.0 system, it's, even at best. That's how good they are. Now, if you're an MMA fighter, the condition that you're in, the athletic condition that you're in is the best in the world. So fatigue makes a coward of any man. So, you know, you don't want to look at the reality of the way things are. You want them to be the way the way you want them to be. And I empathize with that. I understand it. I don't like the world the way it is. I don't like much of anything of what's going on. But if you don't embrace change to help create the future, the one thing that will be is nothing that's important. You will be in that matrix moving forward because you didn't put it in there. Take ownership in change and evolution so you can contribute the value of what you have to offer as an intellectual, as an academic, as a fighter, as a martial artist. Pick one. Participate in the evolution and change instead of standing back and saying, this is terrible, I want the old days. You're never going to go back. Anybody who says, let's take our country back, as soon as they say that, leave the room. Nobody can go backward. If somebody says, here's values that I want to take forward, okay, now you have my attention. But the let's go back to go forward, it's an impossibility. It's a preposterous, intellectually insulting position. So let's not give attention to people that are doing that. Let's give attention to people who are embracing change so they can co-create the future, not try to get us to go back.
Well said.
Now you know why a lot of people don't like me.
And this is, you and I are of similar mindset, which is why some people don't like me and why I'm absolutely loving our conversation. And I suspect we have others out there who are listening and watching and going, yeah. So how would someone, maybe they have a Kenpo school that's not affiliated with your organization and they would consider that, or maybe there's somebody who's, kind of gone lone wolf and they might want to join and find schools affiliated with you. How would they do that?
A couple of answers to that, which are really built around this 5.0 university, online university that we built, which, as I said, every student in any country has full access to all of the information. And as a consequence of that, about a year ago, we created an online academy. So if you just want to sort of stick your toe in the water, go sign up on the online academy and start learning. If you're a Kenpo student who is in a group that doesn't want to investigate because they don't like me, they don't like change, they don't whatever, go do it anyhow. You can join the online academy in a clandestine way. So then you can learn about it, and then you see if you like it. Then you got to know who I am through knowing my black belts, and then you can decide whether you want to be a contributor to the kind of evolution and considerations of how we live our life. And if you are like that, then we are your cup of tea. If you don't want to do that, you want to stick dogmatically to the trajectory of 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago, then you don't belong here. You're not going to like me. I'm not going to like you. So let's not waste time. Just don't come over in the first place. But if you want to evolve and change and you think the direction that we have headed in and the leadership that we have, the communication skills that we've developed, the business models that we have that developed moving forward, then please come and look at who we are and what we are. And if you find this to be a fit, know that every single person of any race, sexual orientation, religious conviction, wherever on the globe you live, we are not judging you. The door is open and you are welcome. The price of admission is integrity.
How do people find all this stuff? The websites, the social media, anything like that?
Everything is on jeffspeakman.com. You can go in, and the other great thing I should mention about the online academy is all of those lessons and instructions are archived. So you can be in Dubai on a radically different time zone and still be able to get 100% of the information. So we have created the first online university like this. We've created the first 5.0 university where all the information is available and accessible to every student from the day you begin. You can log on to Jeff Speakman and see all the stuff you're learning for Yellow Belt with me teaching it to other students, highlighting, check this, look out for that. Here's slow motion. Then I let them do it full speed. So you get that. And then I've written everything down. I rewrote every word and every page of the accumulative journal twice. So the information is there, the clarity is there, and it's should be a very easy and straightforward decision for you to make, because we are fully transparent and open to have any kind of conversation that you're comfortable with, as long as it's respectful, of course. Sure. And so then, if what I'm saying to the people who are listening right now, who really didn't know what this was about, look into it and investigate and know that you're welcome. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay too. You're still welcome to come. Our camp is open every year in July. All of our seminars around, we're all completely open. And for some reason, the rest of the Kenpo world has never come. They don't participate. They don't watch. I mean, like one person in 20 years. That's how much of a deviation that there is. And ironically, last year, and in July, when I tested for my 10th, one of my dear friends in Japanese Goju-ryu, for the first time in world history, brought one of the senior black belts from Okinawa, in the Okinawan Japanese, or Okinawan Goju-ryu, from the world famous Higona Dojo, which, as you know, that's where karate began in the world, and a very well kept lineage. You know, the Japanese people are incredibly organized and structured. So one of the senior black belts for the first time in world history came and sat on our testing board and taught seminars. And I have his signature on my 10th, which was awarded to me by Benny Urquidez. So I'm sure everybody knows who that is. And about 2 months after that, I was having lunch with he and his wife, Sarah, and my wife, Kim. And that's where he told me that I was the first guy he ever promoted to 10th, and I will be the last. And I feel
it's quite the honor.
The weight and responsibility and honor of that. I do the best that I can to live up to that. So if you don't think I deserve a 10th, if you don't think, great, call Benny Urquidez. and by the way, good luck with that, you know, because if you know him at all, that guy speaks and lives the truth, independent of the consequences.
Yeah, you can't argue that man's credentials.
Nor should you.
This has all been great, and thank you. I really do appreciate your time. And so now it's time to wind up, and the ball's back in your court.
Okay.
What are your final words for the folks listening today?
Yeah. What I want to say is, if you give too much value to pursuing the praise of other people, you will be their prisoner, and you'll live out your life in subservience to something that's very much an egomaniac state. So if you're looking for the kinds of things that we have to offer, please come over and look closer. And you may not like it. Although it's extremely rare, there have been a few times I've had to ask people to leave the association, because the way that you conduct your life is very antithetical to how we conduct our lives and the kind of world that we have built. You will never be able to buy a black belt from me, so don't ask, although it happens all the time. And if you want to be a part of what we do, be prepared to retest for your first and second and third degree black belt all the way down the line, for only one reason: everybody else did. So if you have a fourth degree black belt, do not expect to walk in and get a fourth degree diploma from me. And embarrassingly, many people do that, and they use black belt diplomas as a currency. So if you come and join my organization as a fourth, I'll give you a fifth. The only thing that's more embarrassing than that is you accept it. Instead of using that as a metric of this is exactly the person I don't want to be with, you take the fifth degree black belt and go. And then how about people who jump rank? I know people who were a fifth, and then they go to another association and they have an eighth. Well, you just jumped 15 years. Why? The only answers to the questions are egocentric or solipsistic. And how do you think that makes all my guys feel, who do the 5-year minimums in between every belt? Oh, and by the way, if you're with me, you got to be in the test every year in Las Vegas, whether you're testing or not. So it's 4 years until you're eligible for your next rank. You're going to test full test 4 times and get nothing other than the privilege and the honor of being there. So I just want to awaken all martial artists, but especially the Kenpo people out there, to it very well may be that the emperor is wearing no clothes and you're afraid to make a different choice. And remember that life is very, very short under the best of circumstances. And so it was a flip of a coin if I was going to live past my cancer or not. And that happens to what happened to me. There's a lot of people aren't here anymore. So understand that the main cause of death is birth. And you only have a very short time here. So don't make it about the pursuit of money and possessions and clicks on social media. It has been, is now, and forever will be the content of your character that you put on full display to how you interact with other people to make the world a better place. And then you're dead.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. I did. And even if you didn't, I did. Senior Master Speakman, thank you for coming on the show. Now, what I want everybody to know is that even after we wrapped the episode, we kept talking. This is someone who I liked, who I knew him to be before we talked, because I hadn't met him. But now that we've had a conversation, I like him very much. I won't go so far as to say that we're friends, but I look forward to connecting with him in the future. He's doing some remarkable things that are very much aligned with the principles we have here at Whistlekick. He's taking Kenpo and moving it forward. He's taking the principles that he was given by his instructor and making improvements, something that we've talked about on this show, something that I think is very important. And mostly I appreciate his openness, his authenticity during our conversation, because that required trust. And well, he didn't know me from Adam before we got started. So, sir, thank you. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all that you gave. Audience, we've got a bunch of stuff that you can do coming out of this episode. You've got websites to go visit. You've got things to check out, whether or not you're a Kenpo practitioner. There are things that you should probably at least be aware of that we talked about today. So go to his website, see what's going on. And if you do, and you start working with some of his stuff, I'd love to know it. Let me know. Okay. As always, there's no kickback. There's no commission. We don't do anything like that. If you want to go deeper, go check out the show notes at whistlekickmartialartsradio.com. And if you have a martial arts school and you would like it to grow, and you've thought about having a consultant, but maybe you're concerned about them trying to change the way you do your business, or do some things out of integrity, or paying a fortune for the right to have someone work with you, you should reach out, because we've been doing this for 8 years. You know what I stand for. You know the way I run a business. You know that I do everything with integrity. And you also know that my business models always involve giving away the best stuff. So that means when we step into something like a paid consulting relationship, I'm not trying to get all your money day one. I'd rather build a long-term relationship. So you can reach out to me, jeremy@whistlekick.com, or check out the consulting section under the school tab at whistlekick.com. Okay. Seminars, I'll come teach a seminar at your school too. Let me know about that. Would love to do so. Our social media is at Whistlekick. And that's it for today. Thanks for listening or watching. Thanks for being you. Thanks for supporting us, continuing to support us. Until next time, train hard, smile, and have a great day.